Hey folks, today I'm gonna show you how I made this, a Terminator arm, using only this. Let's dive into it. Hey, I'm Raphael. I work in movies industry as a professional Steadicam operator, but I also have an unusual skill. I make awesome props for movies like this with just a few pieces of cardboard and some easy tools. I explain to you how to do this, so if you are new here, consider subscribing. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to make the Terminator arm, but hey, at any point during the video, check out the show notes and links in the description below. I list all the tools that I've used, as well as some additional resources, and of course templates for all parts that I've built. Now, let's jump into the video. Using a steel ruler and a precision knife, I made the pieces between phalanges. I cut a few pieces like this and I made rollers with it. Then to make those ones, I cut several pieces like this. I glued them together that way. Then, using wood glue and a small tool, I smoothed the corners. Using thin pieces of cardboard, I made circles like this. And I glued them between the other parts. To have something like this. Question of the day: what props or objects would you like me to make next? Please write the name of them in the description below. Then, to make the phalanges, I cut several pieces like this. I glued them 2 by 2. Then I hid the corrugations that way. And again I smoothed the corners. This ones will be the first row of phalanges. Then I made a few more like this, but for these ones I smashed the bottom of them using wood glue. There will be the second row of phalanges. Then, to make the last row of phalanges, I cut little squares like this and I glued them 2 by 2. Afterwards, using thin pieces of cardboard, I made several pieces like this. And I assembled them that way. Then I hid the corrugation. Then I made holes on the back on all of them. Using thin pieces of cardboard, I made wings like this. I glued them on the half of the phalanges. And I assembled the phalanges. I did the same for the 2 other rows of phalanges. Then, to make the tips of the fingers, I made a few more rollers like this. And I smashed them a little bit to make them oval. I hid the corrugation on one side of the little ones. And I glued them on the last row of phalanges. I smoothed the corners of the last row of phalanges. To have at the end something like that. Afterwards, with all of those elements, I assembled the fingers using hot glue. By the way, if you feel like you need to see more about a specific step of this construction, sign up to my email list in the description below and you'll receive a time-lapse video start to finish of the full construction, as well as additional information and pictures of the craft. Then, to make the bolts, I cut several pieces like this. I glued on the side of them thin pieces of cardboard, and I smashed them a little bit to give it a bolt aspect. At the end, your fingers will have to look like that. To make the thumb, I cut pieces like this. To link the tendons later, I added 4 little pieces like this. To make this part, I cut several pieces like that. As usual, I hid the corrugations. I glued the square pieces 2 by 2. Then I sand one side of them using sandpaper. From 4 of them, and I cut in half the last one. I glued the little piece 2 by 2 as well, and using hot glue I shaped one side of them. Afterward I made the wrist, reporting the templates on a piece of cardboard. By the way, you have to use this technique for all the templates that you'll find in the description below. Then again, I hid the corrugations. Then I cut 4 pieces like this. And I glued them on the first part. Afterwards, I started to glue the elements of the fingers. I used my 2/2 square to make this. I glued all the fingers. To make the tendons, I cut a few pieces of cardboard like this, I made rollers with them, I glued together the 3 lower parts, and I made little notches on the top ones. Did thin pieces of cardboard here and here, and I adapted them to my hand, that way. To make this part, cut pieces like this, I glued the one piece at about 2 cm from the bottom. Then again, I hid the corrugation. Then, using thin pieces of cardboard, I made the design on it. Then, as usual, I smoothed all the angles. Then I started to make the biggest pistons. I glued a few pieces of cardboard on it to make the design. Then I made the second row of pistons. And then I made the third row of pistons. And then I glued the second row and the third row of pistons together. Afterward, I started to make the big tube on the back. I hid the corrugation and I cut off a big part of this tube. To have at the end something that looks like that. I made the design on the top piece. I added a thin pieces on the back over here to make the bottom of this tube a little bit bigger. Then I made another wall like this, thick enough to fit inside of the tube. And I added a thin piece on the top. Then, using those pieces, I made a wall like this and another round piece like this. I glued them together and I glued the whole piece on the other one. Then I assembled the arm. I made this side of this one in an angle in order to glue it correctly. In order to make the cables, I used a real cable like this and I surrounded it with cardboard. This part is tricky to do, but with a little bit of patience, you'll be okay. Then, using thin pieces of cardboard and wood glue, I made the design on it. Afterwards, I removed the cable. Then I glued them on the arm. Here and here. I added some details on this piece as well. Then I started to make the last part of this arm, the elbow. I removed a little part from this one in order to fit this piece inside. I did the same for the two others. Using my circle cutter, I removed the first layer of corrugation on both sides. Then I made two other round pieces like this. I used one of them to make the notch on this one, and I made two others the same way. I glued them together, and I removed a little part like this. Then, using rings of cardboard, I made a design like this on both of them. Then I made the details on all of them. Cut a round piece like this to make the base. Then I made a thick square like this, in order to have a little space between the elbow and the arm. Then I made the pedestal. In order to keep the arm stuck on it, I added magnets in the pedestal. And of course, I added another one on the back of the arm. To make the back steel, I added two more pieces like this. To make the construction solid and resistant, I covered the whole craft with a mix of wood glue and water. I made two layers of it. The first one with an equal mix of wood glue and water, and the second one with twice as much wood glue as water. And the last step that I do on all of my craft was to cover it with two layers of varnish. So this is how I made the Terminator Arm. And if you feel like you need to see more about a specific step, subscribe to my email list in the description below and you'll receive a full time-lapse video of the entire construction. And if you want to learn more about how to make props and stuff from movies like this, with just a few pieces of cardboard, watch those videos over here and hit the subscribe icon as well so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.